This is the Hoff Time Report with Idaho Freedom Foundation President Wayne Hoffman, one of Idaho's most respected, influential public policy voices.
Hey, welcome back. And guess what? We're in the studio here in the Hoff building, not named for Wayne Hoffman, although when I say it, it makes the leftists go crazy. Welcome back. It's good to be back on the program, back in Boise. And we've got Janice McGeachin, Lieutenant Governor of the state of Idaho, joining us today to talk about the special session that Governor Little announced this morning. And let's just get right into the conversation. Lieutenant Governor, welcome. What do you think about the governor's special session call?
Well, we've been hearing rumors about this for some time now, so looks like we'll be back in Boise next week. I was planning to be there anyway, so hopefully we'll get back to Boise. The Senate, as the president of the Senate, I hope I won't have to gavel any senators back into their seat. That happened last year. I had to gavel the pro tem into a seat during roll call. They weren't too happy about that. But my job as the president of the Senate is to conduct the rules of the Senate to keep an orderly process. So it looks like next Thursday, 8 a.m., we'll be getting back into session. So I have lots of thoughts about it. This isn't my first rodeo. This will actually be my third special session that I've served 2 times as lieutenant governor, and then 1 time when then Governor Jim Risch was the governor and called for a special session to take 3 mills off of the local property tax and increase the sales tax by 1 cent, and all under the pretense that would lower property tax for the people in Idaho. But look where we're at today, years later, really hasn't made a change. I think the interesting thing is I always like to go to the Constitution and see what our Constitution says about these issues. Our Constitution says that the governor may call the legislature back into session. It says the governor may, on extraordinary occasions, convene the legislature by proclamation, stating the purpose for which he has convened it. So the way I read the legislature, it's meant to be for a purpose, like a subject, rather than for a specific piece of legislation. So what we're going to be dealing with under Governor Little's proclamation is a specific piece of legislation, as was then Governor Risch's legislation was a specific piece of legislation. But if you read the Constitution, it's more, it says it should be more related to a purpose, a particular purpose, and not necessarily a particular piece of legislation.
Now, you referenced the 2006 session, the special session, where Governor Risch proposed a very specific piece of legislation. But I was warning folks at the time that was going to be used as a model for future special sessions where the governor just controls the outcome. But we saw in the 2020 special session where the governor proposed very specific legislation, and he got very different legislation sent to him and signed into law. So is it still possible, in your view, that could happen this time?
Well, and you're right. There's different views about this, and we've seen different things happen in the past. And in that 2020 legislative session, was it 20 or 21? Wayne, I thought it was 2021.
The 2021 session was the continuation of the legislative session at recess. The 2020 legislative special session was the one with the immunity legislation.
Okay, so that had to do, yeah. And that's an example of the other concept. Yes, the governor had a proposal before the legislature having to deal with immunity and release of liability for businesses. But the interesting thing about that bill, the governor's idea failed to pass through the legislature. There was a bill written, but it was written in a way that if the only reason a business would gain immunity in the state of Idaho is if they followed all the governor's rules and his emergency declaration during COVID. And fortunately, because of the people of Idaho who got involved, and many of them came to the Capitol and had never set foot in the Capitol before, they came forward and they testified, and they were successful in actually passing a different piece of legislation that was strict immunity, strict liability relief with no strings attached. Just basically just saying businesses are not responsible for if somebody were to get sick within their confines.
So there is a possibility that could happen here. Is that what you're hoping will happen? I mean, what is your read on let's talk about the legislation the governor's proposed. Are you favorable to it? Is it the right policy in your estimation? Is there something better that the state could be doing?
Well, I do think it's interesting in the governor's proclamation. It reads that there is an emergency in the state of Idaho. Well, the only emergency truly, we are suffering from inflation with our food. We're suffering with inflation effects on filling up our gas tank, but neither one of those issues is going to be addressed in the legislation. So the bill has been put together deals with reducing tax rates, but it's reducing the income tax rate, that's always a good thing. Rebates are good. That's always good to give money back to the people of Idaho. But with a surplus that we have over $2 billion projected, why aren't we looking at more reduction on of the tax burden for the people of Idaho, specifically on the food that we're buying, the gas that we're filling up our tanks with, and also property tax. Really, property taxes are killing small business. They're killing the budgets of families, especially young families and the elderly families that are on fixed income. So why are those ideas not considered a part of this emergency for inflation? The effects of Joe Biden's excessive spending in America, which is what is causing inflation all across our country. Those are hurting Idaho families, and I say that those are all good, legitimate reasons to come back into session when there is that much excess revenues. But basically, it means we're overtaxing our citizens. And why not give them more and different forms of tax relief instead of just cobbling one lower rate of income tax and rebates with a massive spending bill? I
Yeah,
have to
spending.
question why we're doing this.
What about the spending part? Because it's interesting that, coupled with the tax relief, and this is all in one bill, by the way, for the viewers who didn't know this, there's not separate pieces of legislation that are going to be voted on. It's one bill
Yeah.
that has the tax relief as part of it, and then the other part of it is $420 million put in a fund for education.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that component?
Well, and again, going back to our Constitution, and where our Constitution, when it talks about the legislative powers, it says that every act shall embrace but one subject matter properly before the legislative body. We're not Washington, D.C. We're not supposed to be combining these bills. You got a tax bill and then you've got a spending bill cobbled together. There's a reason why Idaho has this in our Constitution, and it's because we don't want to become like Washington, D.C. So I question that. I question the single subject part of the bill. They claim that it's just setting up a fund where they're going to funnel sales tax revenues into this fund to then be appropriated out to the legislature. But why the rush? Why don't they wait until January when the legislature is in full legislative session? I actually sent a message to the governor and to Speaker Bedke and Senator Pro Tem, asking them about the wisdom of calling us right now because of the cost of these special sessions at a cost of $30,000 per day. And who knows if it's going to be 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days, but it could be up to $100,000 cost of a special session. Why now? Why not wait until the start of the next legislative session? And really what they're trying to accomplish is really it would be no different for them to just, if Proposition 1 passes, which Proposition 1 was put together by Reclaim Idaho. It was lots of people from out of state that came to Idaho and got enough signatures for this to be on a ballot to raise income tax rates at California levels, 10.9% income tax rates, California levels, and then put all this money into the public school system. So why are we doing this now? I just have to keep asking that question. Why are we doing it now rather than if Proposition 1 passes? All they have to do is just go back in, the start of January and just change those tax rates back down. It's really no different. Honestly, the proposal that the governor has put together, in my view, is no different than the reality of that happening, and at a savings to the taxpayer of, $30,000 to $100,000 by not holding a special session right now.
So why is the governor doing this in your estimation?
Well, I question that myself. I don't see any reason why it's imperative for it to be done right now. Even the way the bill is written, where it says that these tax rebates shall be distributed before the end of the year. Well, again, the legislature could do this at the beginning of January and make it retroactive. So I don't read the emergency nature of that. And if we are talking about emergencies and calling it inflation relief, then why are we not talking about giving true additional relief to taxpayers in the form of grocery tax, exemption from food, perhaps lowering the gas tax in Idaho, and addressing finally property tax reform and restricting these local budgets, because we all know it's always the spending that drives the tax on the people of Idaho.
Does the school system need $420 million right now?
Well, and again, on this issue, I think this is how I would do it if I was the governor. I think there should be a broad examination of what's happening in our public school system. We all know that there's a drain on all of our infrastructure, our roads, our healthcare, schools. They're busting at the seams. But why? Why is that happening? Why are all these? Maybe we need to be taking a look at some of the local planning and zoning rules. Here, I'm in Southeast Idaho. I live in Idaho Falls, but there's a small community, Ammon, Idaho, that a big time developer outside of Utah wanted to come to Ammon, and they were petitioning the Ammon City Council to annex over 600 acres into the city so that this developer could then tap into the infrastructure of the city of Ammon. And Ammon did not have the infrastructure, and they were talking about how there was a need for a $25 million sewer and water project. So we cannot accommodate the growth that these big time developers are trying to develop. They're trying to take away our farmland. They're tapping into our water source. Why are the planning and zoning commissions giving just carte blanche approval to these massive subdivisions all over Idaho? So if that's part of what's driving the demand and the increase in our classrooms, we should take a look at that, and we should decide how to deal with this growth, and rather than just throwing more money at it and not really addressing the underlying causes and concerns. And then the question again, is all this money needed in education? Well, I think a lot of people recognize that education is definitely one of the most important things that we can spend our money on. But right now, 62% of our general fund goes towards funding education. And from some of the results that we see, where the statewide reading averages are below 50%, statewide math scores are below that. And I know your organization, Wayne IFF, has put together this amazing link, the LEAD link, that people can go to any school district in the state of Idaho and click on that link and see where the students are in their school districts. Where do they rank as far as these scores? That is what we should be focusing on, is what do we need to do to bring up those scores in math and reading, teach them the skills, teach our kids the skills, and properly equip them for their careers after high school. And if we're not doing that, then we're failing our kids, and just throwing not necessarily the solution to that problem. And then I mean, I've heard from teachers that they, with some of this social justice learning that's being taught in Idaho schools, the student, because of stress and emotional challenges, if they're acting up in the classroom, the teacher must allow the student to go outside of the hall and just play on their phone, on their cell phone, and play games and stuff. I mean, that is not what we should be doing in the classroom. We are failing our kids if we're not teaching them to have discipline and to truly be in a learning environment. And I think that we need to focus, we need to examine what's happening in our schools and address those things. Maybe money is part of it, maybe not, but just to throw the money at it without really examining and taking a look at what's happening, driving the growth, and why our kids are falling behind, then I question. Oh, the other thing I will say is that if you go to Reclaim Idaho's website, it's chock full of lies. On their website, they claim that Idaho has cut funding to education over the last decade or so, but that's just a flat out lie. Ever since 2011, there's a graph on Idaho Fiscal Facts, which shows the funding for education has increased every single year since 2011. Now, granted, maybe not as much as some people would like that to be, but it's a flat out lie to say that we've been cutting funding to education over the years. It's not true. And I would just say, instead of trying to confuse the voters, now they're going to have two things to vote on. Why don't you just stand up and say, no, this is not, Proposition 1 is not the right thing to do. It's not the right time to be raising taxes on the people of Idaho. Vote no. And then, let the legislature and the executive branch look at what is happening in the state of Idaho. I really would like more leadership on that happening in our school system.
Did the governor give a victory to Reclaim Idaho then?
Well, I'm being a little bit facetious here, but I mean, I don't know, maybe Luke Mayville should have a desk in the governor's office now. I mean, look at the last two major initiatives that have passed in Idaho. The Medicaid expansion a few years back, and now this. Why do we concede to this, where both the legislative branch, especially the legislative branch of government, needs to claim their authority on spending and tax policies? And also question, in our Constitution, it says that when talking about the powers of the legislative branch of government and questioning the constitutionality of Proposition 1, it says that all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. And so Proposition 1 attempts to significantly increase Idahoans' tax rates at California levels, but our Constitution says that bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. So I would think that just by that alone, people could make the argument that Prop 1 is unconstitutional. Now, maybe it could be an advisory vote like this bill that's going to be before the legislature next week. But as far as actually having the authority to raise taxes on the people of Idaho, it's pretty clear to me what our Constitution says about that.
Well, the Constitution also says that the legislature to appropriate money, and the Reclaim Idaho proposition calls for the State Board of Education to be given a pile of money, and they do the appropriating. So I think it's
That's
probably
right.
in that point too.
Yes.
But it seems as if we've just conceded the ground, and it's kind of interesting also that we know from the evidence that we've compiled on the on leadmap.org that these school districts are spending a lot of money on wokeism, that their performance levels are terrible. We know that kids are now being convinced that they are a different gender or that they've got some kind of mental health problem that needs to be addressed through therapy or surgery. And it's happening here. Why wouldn't that $420 million go be used to help continue that kind of stuff?
That's a fair question. And I I would like to see more leadership from our legislature and the governor on this issue as far as what's happening in our classrooms and what are we doing to make sure that our kids are properly prepared for their careers after high school. And I have not seen the level of interest in that regard. When I was conducting my education task force committee in 2021, we were all just trying to get a grasp of what is this? You know, it was right after COVID-19, and our kids were sent home to do online learning, which was wrong. We should never have kept our kids out of the classroom for almost a whole year, but we did. But I guess a blessing about that is that parents were then peering over their children's shoulders, looking at the computer, looking at what they were being taught. And that's when it was that year when the legislature started keying in on what is all this that's happening. The terminology changes, but it's all the same idea, same concept, that we're um, teaching our children to think about America in different ways, or think in terms of division and not real inclusion as far as people in the classroom. So we were trying to just understand what it was all about. We learned a lot. We actually made some recommendations to the State Board of Education. We were the people of Idaho who testified to the State Board. We were able to postpone a requirement to teach diversity, equity, and inclusion within our university systems. But we keep learning more and more about what's happening, and it's just kind of the thing that I discovered that year is that there is a rule, a Biden administration rule, that just like Common Core, and this is how Common Core was adopted in Idaho, the federal government dangles the money and they promise that school districts can get grant money if they do certain things. And so there was a Biden administration rule that said school districts could apply for this money if they would teach things in the classroom, such as the 1776 project, which is contrary to the founding of America in 1776. And also if they would show certain TV programs, CNN, news broadcasts in the classroom. So instead of really targeting that and finding out what is going on with this Biden administration rule, it seems like, there has been no attention paid to that.
Yeah, and of course now the free and reduced lunch program is being co-opted to do the transgender agenda, and we said, look, if you want to take $400 million and dump it in the public education system, the way to do that is to remove all the federal funding, and then you won't have schools that are on the hook for any edict from Washington D.C. Would you expect something? Is that a reasonable proposition?
Absolutely reasonable. In fact, when I campaigned for governor, I talked about that, the importance of as far for us to protect our sovereignty and preserve our traditional conservative values, we've got to wean ourselves from the federal teat. And it was back when I was campaigning for lieutenant governor, at the time our budget was comprised of about 36% of those federal dollars. Now we're over 46, maybe 48% of our budget now comes from the federal government. And that's exactly how they coerce the states to implement their laws. It's how they were able to implement Obamacare into the state of Idaho, implement Common Core. And you mentioned that with the restrooms in the schools. If there is a federal election bill that is passed, that is how they will implement federal law into our elections, is by the money that they get sent to the states. And we have enough natural resources in Idaho that we can start weaning ourselves from that federal teat and protect the sovereignty of our state.
So let's say that you were in the legislature, not as the presiding officer of the state senate, but you were actually a voting member of the legislature as you were in the 2000s. What would you do if a bill like this were in front of you? It cuts taxes a little bit, and it dumps a bunch of money in the public school system. Is that a yes vote? Is it a no vote? I mean, where do you land?
I I always like to keep my powder dry and make sure, because I have looked at the bill today. There's always something about a piece of legislation that could cause a person concern. It could even be just one word. So I always like to say that it's gone through to the full vetting process and you've read through the bill. But I would say conceptually, I have no problem at all if I were a legislator to stand up on the floor of the House, as I did during the session, during Rish's 2006 session. I voted against that because I did not believe that it was going to accomplish what it said it was going to believe. And I was one of the few Republicans who voted against that. But I have an independent mind. I like to thoroughly study the bill that's before me. But I would say I have no problem at this point even advocating against and telling the people of Idaho that Proposition 1 is not the right thing to do. Vote no on Proposition 1. It's all about raising taxes significantly. And the crazy thing about this so-called this governor's proposal is that it also, I'm always a strong advocate for fiscal responsibility. And I believe that if you're going to create a new program or put more money into something, that you have to provide a source of revenue for it. And so this doesn't do that. It cuts revenues and it massively increases funding and spending. And that's not, in my view, that's not a recipe for fiscal conservatism and being having the fiduciary responsibility of the taxpayer in mind. So I have no problem saying no to Prop 1. This is not the time to raise people's taxes. And if we're going to come together next week as lawmakers and we're talking about reducing inflation, I would say let's throw some other ideas out there, some worthy bills about helping Idahoans even more than giving them a rebate on their income tax or lowering ongoing income tax rates. Let's look at reducing their tax burden on food. Let's look at lowering gas taxes. And for sure, let's take a look at what we can do to help people with the property tax burden.
Yeah, there's something, I guess it's just sort of stunning to me that here you've got an 85% Republican legislature. You've got a Republican governor. There's no need to appeal to the Democrats here. You could easily, with $2 billion, you could practically wipe out the property tax. You could cut the income tax near zero. There are a lot of pretty dramatic. Certainly, you can get rid of the grocery tax, where a lot of the state revenues are coming from. Every time you pay more for your groceries, that 6% that's on your grocery bill compounds according to the inflation. And this is the best we can do. I kind of feel like I'm living in in Connecticut or something, and I'm dealing with a bunch of leftists who recognize the need to do
Yeah,
something
and
about tax policy, but they don't know really what to do short of a token relief package.
yes, and tax policy is very complex. I served on the tax committee. It's very complex. You must understand the way that it is going to affect, other areas, broad picture. You must understand that fully before making changes to tax policy. And um, who knows? I mean, I think there are some aren't there some rates of inflation that are built into to comparing with what's happening with the consumer price index that will affect the rates into the year, I think, like in the next 10 years. Again, like I said, I haven't really had a chance to read through the whole. I think it's a 14-page bill. It just came out today, so a lot to digest there.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of components, and certainly, yeah, tax policy is very complicated until you boil it down to what it actually is, which is theft. If I go to Janice McGeachin's house in Idaho Falls and say, knock on the door and hold a gun to your face and say, "Give me all your money," that would be considered robbery, and I would be arrested for it. And since that's unseemly, what we do is we just have a lawmaking body get together and vote to take money from you and give it to somebody else, and that's considered to be legal, lawful. We call it in the vernacular illegal plunder, and so that's
Oh
why
yeah,
when I look at this 5.8%, thanks for cutting my income taxes. I'm glad you're doing that. Stop stealing so damn much from me.
that's
Stop.
that's right. Quit taking it
Yeah,
from us in the first place.
yeah, it's too much to ask. I
Um,
mean, and in doing that, they're taking away our humanity, our ability to care for our neighbors, our friends, people who are in need, and instead of making that as our responsibility, we just hand a bunch of money over to the government. The government creates a program. The program is supposed to help people, and it doesn't. And then they end up needing more money from us. It makes the problem worse, and the circle continues over and over and over again. That's why I think that this is extraordinarily cruddy. Um, the right tax rate for income taxes should be 0, and we practically could be there, but not
yeah,
for a weak-kneed legislature and governor that capitulates to a leftist group funded by out-of-state leftist dollars.
yes, and this proposal, I mean, what they're proposing to throw, into the fund is even more than this leftist Reclaim Idaho proposal. It's more money. And
Yeah.
again, if we need to put more money in, let's do it, but let's do it the right way. Why is some of that money not going to be going towards education choice in the state of Idaho? Because that's a big topic of concern for a lot of people, with parents that are not satisfied with what they're getting out of the public school system. And in our constitution, it says that we're supposed to provide a thorough, uniform, free system of public schools. But it's not free when we're spending 62% of our budget on education funding. It's not free. So why are we not, why is that not going to be part of this discussion, that we give parents return some of that money back to the family, to the parents, and let them decide how they best choose to educate their child?
Which, of course, is another concern because they're gonna say, "Well, we put $400 million in the system. Now is not the time to do a new education program because of all this new money, and we don't even know how it's necessarily gonna be used yet. So let's just see how that thing works out and give it another year before we do something like education savings accounts or vouchers." I just guarantee that's gonna be part of the narrative, and we already heard from the, State Board of Education where they said, "We're gonna need more time to figure out how all this money works," and then we dump another $400 million in their lap. I guess they're gonna need more time for that too. It's, deeply concerning.
All these things take time, and that's why, our system was set up the way that it is, that these ideas could percolate, the good ideas could percolate to the top, and through the right process where you bring a bill, you bring an idea forward, you put it through the sausage making process. That's what, I mean, I was a lawmaker and we teased about, I mean, it's true. It's kind of the way it is. Yeah. The way the bill that you end up with is not always the one that you start with, but you have to listen to different points of view and make sure that you're passing the right policy for the people of Idaho. And
Do you
these
have any?
things take time.
All right, closing thoughts from you. What else should we know
Well,
about this? Final ideas.
the other thing that's odd to me about this proposal is that it's drafted up in a way that it says, and the lawmakers, from what I read, the way they understand this is that this is going to be an advisory vote. That if this passes, it's going to be the legislature wants to hear from the people of Idaho about what they should be doing with taxes and spending. So it's the so-called advisory vote, but um, nowhere does it say, like, for example, if it does pass, the way I read the bill, at least what I've seen, is that's a why, regardless of whether or not it says this is just an advisory bill. I could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding. I think it's odd that the legislature is asking the people what they should do. They don't know what to do, and they're asking the people what should we do?
Yeah,
What should we do with all these taxes, revenues, and
the reason
I think that's a job of being
you're
a duly elected official to know things.
sure you're breaking up a little bit, but I to clarify the reason, I believe the reason for that is because if the legislature were to pass a law and then ask the voters to approve the law on the November ballot, it would be a delegation of legislative authority. And so the legislature can't delegate its authority to the voters on passing legislation. And so instead they go with an advisory vote, which is not binding in any way. But even still, it's kind of a goofy thing that, we've elected people to vote on complex tax policy issue, and then you put an advisory vote and you don't know where that's going to come down. And the voters might say something like, well, 50% in favor of the policy, and or 52% in favor of it and 48% again. What does that mean? That's not dispositive of anything. I guess we lost Janice. I'm sorry about that. She got disconnected there. But anyway, I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for coming on the program, and sorry for the technical problems there at the end. But I just want to say, listen, this is not a done deal. I know that a majority of legislators have signed on to this, both Republicans, Democrats, which should tell you everything you need to know about the policy. If the Democrats are enjoying it, and are favorable to it, the most leftist Democrats in the room are favorable to it. Should tell you there's something not quite right here. Reclaim Idaho is dancing for joy about it. So can we do better? You're damn right we can. We definitely can. And again, I say this, I love tax cuts, as much as the next guy, but it's just striking to me that this is the best we can do. $2 billion budget surplus, and we're going to do a measly income tax break when we could be doing so much more to lower people's tax burdens, and in doing so, provide them some much needed relief from inflation. And if you are going to put money into the public schools, fine, but use that to subvert the federal edicts that our school districts are under right now. We know just by the mere fact that school districts are accepting millions of dollars in federal funds and they're using it for the free and reduced school lunch program, that it means that our kids are soon going to be subjected to enforced transgender agenda propaganda, that the bathrooms have to be reconfigured, the policies have to be changed to accept the usage of different pronouns. Kids are going to have to be protected from their parents in case they decide to come back with different names and pronouns. I mean, that's a legitimate thing to do. Instead, it's here's $400 million. And what's changed from last legislative session? Nothing. The legislature just gave the schools a 12.5% increase. I think all told over the last couple of years, it's about a 42% increase in public school spending. And what have we gotten for it? Nothing. And no one's expecting anything better. They just put more money into schools so they can win a political battle where they say, look how much we care more than the other team about our kids' education in their schools. And it's crap. It's crap. I'm telling you, it is absolutely insane that this is what we're doing in Idaho, which is why I say to folks, look, it doesn't matter what the letter is next to their name. Do they support limited government, free market principles, and conservative principles? And that's telling from the types of policies they pass, both spending policy and tax policy. This is not conservative. I mean, I guess it's not, it's not as leftist as it could be, but certainly it's very telling that you're getting a minor tax cut and a pile of money put into the education system so we could appease the leftists. And that's wrong. So I do hope that you guys who are watching this and are listening will stay engaged. It's not a done deal. Your legislators need to hear from you. If you think this is the right policy, let them know it's the right policy. But if you think that they could do better, if you think they could do more, if you think the tax cut could be more robust or the money for public schools more targeted or not included in this package at all, then let them know that, because there's still time. And it's worrisome that all Reclaim Idaho has to do is put a proposal on the ballot, and without even a shot fired, the governor of the state of Idaho and the entire Republican-controlled legislature surrenders. Pretty incredible, really. So anyway, again, thanks to Lieutenant Governor McGeachin for being on the program. Thank you for watching and for listening. And we'll be back again on Thursday with another Hoff Time. I hope you'll also tune in tomorrow to watch Brian Hyde's Nowhere to Hide as he breaks down the leftist news media and their nonsense. And certainly probably a lot of it's going to be dedicated to the coverage of this issue. So thanks again for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Hoff Time Report with Wayne Hoffman. Be sure to visit idahofreedom.org for Wayne's articles, IFF research, and show notes from today's episode.